Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to this Legal Wrapped Up panel where we're interviewing our wonderful Dean Lindquist. We have a few prepared questions for her. We're hoping to have some time for audience questions, but we're going to dive into this now. My name is Eric Kubo. I'm a Thrale here at WashU Law.
I'm Alex Rumpkin. I'm a 1L at WashU Law.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bernard Alegbade, and I'm also a 1L here at WashU Law.
And I'm Steph Lindquist, Dean here at WashU Law. It's great to see everybody.
So Dean Lindquist, I just want to start off with like a simple platform question of engaging with this. How does your vision of legal tech benefit the students at WashU? I mean, we have 2 weeks of programming. Clearly, this is very important to the institution. Why?
A couple of reasons, Alex, and thanks for the question. And also, thank you so much for all of you in attendance to talk about legal tech and AI here at WashU Law. Some of you have heard this story that I tell about why I became preoccupied with this issue. Last summer, so actually summer before last, before I took this job, can everybody hear me okay? There's quite an echo, as long as you can hear me. Are you good? Yitzi? Okay, good. I happened to be on a sailboat, and I was on a sailboat with a son and his girlfriend, both of whom were 3Ls, a son of a friend of mine, both of whom were 3Ls at George Washington. And in the course of several conversations I had with him about his experience at law school, he started to describe to me the myriad ways that he used artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, Claude, and other tools to help him study for law school and do a number of other things related to his legal education. And at that moment, I sort of had a light bulb go off over my head. I was aware of ChatGPT because over dinner one night at my brother's house, we asked it to compose Shakespearean sonnets about a number of things, including men barbecuing and other things. And it produced some incredible sonnets. And if you haven't done this, I'd encourage you to do it. I then ended up creating sonnets for all of the important Supreme Court decisions that I taught in my constitutional law class, hoping that would help students think through some of the issues from a Shakespearean standpoint. So I realized at that time that this was going to be transformative. And transformative in a way that things like Westlaw and Lexis, while themselves very transformative, it was going to far exceed the impact of those technologies on the practice of law. And if you think about it, it's understandable why. What do large language models do? They generate text. Generative AI generates text based upon the probability of one word following another. And what we do as lawyers, of course, in many circumstances, is to think through problems, many of which have been thought through before in different factual scenarios, and recite the legal principles that are relevant in those cases. And so in many circumstances, we are ourselves thinking through precedent, right? And precedent itself is one word in front of another. And so when it comes to professions that are going to be affected by large language models and artificial intelligence, it struck me that law is very likely one of the most profoundly affected professions. And I want our students at WashU to enter their legal practice or their clerkships, wherever they're working, with a leg up over other students who are graduating from law school. And one way that can work is if our graduates become the go-to people at their law firms, in their chambers, at their corporations or nonprofit organizations. They are the go-to people to seek advice on how to use these tools, the ethical limitations and concerns one might have with them, how to use them responsibly, and how to use them effectively, because they are going to change how we practice law, and of course they're changing the practice of law as we speak. One of the most, I think, profound consequences of legal technologies and generative AI is on the democratization of our legal system. We heard from Judge Deal on a panel couple of days ago about pro se litigants using AI to generate legal documentation for their claims. Well, that's magnificent. They can't necessarily afford a lawyer. We are pretty expensive, but they can use AI to ensure that their claims are considered at the same level as counseled cases are. And so that I see as democratization. And so the impact that AI is going to have on our legal system, on legal practice, on how we practice law is going to be profound. And I want to make sure that we're at the cutting edge of those changes.
So it's very clear that AI is going to transform the whole legal field. I'm currently in our AI law class taught by Professor Ryan Dury, who's also part of the AI Institute. And on day one, he talked about something that Judge Easterbrook had talked about during the 90s, which is that the law of the horse, the idea being that when the horse came along, it was this big, life-changing thing, but there was all this kind of law that was implicated by it, whether it was property law or torts, and that he was talking about cyber law, though, and he was saying cyber law was the law of the horse, that we were kind of looking at this emergent technology and trying to create this new field when there really wasn't a new field. It was just all these disparate fields being impacted in understandable ways. Do you feel AI law is the law of the horse, or do you feel that AI law is something completely new?
What a good question, Alex. I think right now we're dealing with AI with the law of the horse in some ways, because this technology is so rapidly evolving that it's difficult for the law to keep up. I mean, obviously, we have to write regulations, we have to write statutes, decide court cases to help us understand or regulate this technology. And this reminds me of a panel I was on last week on AI and elections. Alex was there, as a matter of fact. Perhaps you were too, Eric, I don't remember. We were talking about deepfakes in politics and how damaging deepfakes can be to trust in our political system. That's very obvious. And they already are, in fact, probably doing some damage to trust in our in elections. And right now we have some states that have passed laws that are subject to challenge under the First Amendment and under Section 230 of the Federal Communications Act. But there are some efforts being made rather piecemeal across the country with different types of regulations for deepfakes. And so we're playing catch up already. And I think your question is a good one. One thing I will say, where AI is not the law of the horse, or where AI will not create the law, or will not be subject to the law of the horse, is in the regulation of the technology itself. We have to think, I think, very creatively about how to govern this technology. And how that happens is in some ways a collective action problem. I always analogize it to climate change. It's very difficult to regulate climate change because it affects everyone everywhere, and individual pieces of legislation won't necessarily address the problem unless everyone addresses the problem. And since AI will be pervasive everywhere across the internet, right, and accessible to everyone in every place around the globe, potentially, it's very difficult for the globe to ever regulate anything. And there are real reasons to be concerned about governance and regulation of AI. As I mentioned in a speech I gave at the installation of the deanship that I hold, the Nickerson Deanship, there are some very, very dark ways that AI can be used. And I mentioned there autonomous weapons systems. And the idea that you can upload someone's face onto facial recognition software, which is a form of AI, of course, and then send that out in a drone to assassinate that person. And I think we have to think very hard about how we're going to regulate AI to stop that kind of thing from happening, and it's going to be very difficult for us to do it. In the United States, we have to rely on, if we're thinking about regulation across the entire country, we have to think about the government doing something about this. And right now, my understanding is the one area that the federal government is looking at carefully is to exempt these OpenAI and other companies like it from copyright restrictions that would limit their ability to use information on the internet to educate these large language models. So copyright law may have to be amended, or at least, I guess if you're an author like me, and Udit and I are working together on a program to generate some revenue for us. For those of us who have materials out there on the internet that are being used to train the large language models, there's some compensation that can be had, apparently. So you can talk to Udit about that if you're a faculty member or an author. But in any event, I think we have to pay attention at the federal level and then ultimately at the global level. And I was at a conference in Hong Kong in the spring of educators from around the world and government officials from China, Hong Kong, Australia, and other places. And I asked the question, if we're going to govern AI and make sure that it's not a danger to humankind, and I do think it could be, very much so, who's going to conduct that review and regulation? And the answer was the United Nations. And I'm a fan of the United Nations, but frankly, I do not think the United Nations has the power or the punch to regulate AI. So we really, as a species, we better start thinking hard about how we're going to manage this. So I think in answer to your question, Alex, is a long way of saying that we are playing catch up, trying to use old laws to address this new technology, but ultimately we do need to develop a law of AI that is no longer the law of the horse.
Dean Lindquist, and you alluded to it already in your response to that question, but I wanted to kind of dig in here about what gives you the most optimism and then also what worries you the most about AI. I think deepfakes is certainly one of the biggest concerns that we've seen so far, but there's a lot of optimism around the technology. Was curious what excites you the most about it?
Well, I think so I'm very excited about it. I wouldn't be, so my focus on AI for the law school is not solely focused on the ethical concerns and privacy limitations that we want to be sure we address, but rather how it can, I think, exponentially improve our thinking, right? I mean, and I know you're going to ask me a question about whether lawyers will lose their job because of AI, but what I think this will do for us is help us sort of leapfrog or adjust our thinking to a higher level. I was talking to somebody recently about writing articles and how I've spent days thinking about a couple of sentences and how best to clarify my point. And I love that work. I wouldn't be an academic if I didn't love writing. But a lot of that writing, that sort of formulaic stuff, can be done by AI. And I can think harder about the theoretical issues, in my case, the empirical issues that I'm analyzing. And it will free me, right, to be a more creative thinker. And so I think of it as an assistant, right? And an assistant that's in some ways, I often think about the Borg. That's a negative reference for those of you who are Star Trek fans. But it is a constant assistant to our thinking and should be able to elevate our thinking. And should be able to help young lawyers, right? If you have to write a motion to dismiss, AI can get you started on that, and you can finish that motion to dismiss in a much more, and hopefully in a more sophisticated way with the help of AI. The other thing I absolutely love about it is if you're drafting contracts, for example. My worry as a lawyer when I was practicing law and drafting contracts was, what was I missing? Because your client counts on you not to miss things, right? To understand the nuances of the jurisdiction, the laws, the particular choice of law that's in the contract, that jurisdiction's legal restrictions and compliance issues. And AI will be sure that we don't make those mistakes. So we should have tighter, I think, agreements and more effective collaborations, legal collaborations as a result of AI. So I'm bullish on it. I think it's great. I just think we have to be smart about it. Thanks, Bernard.
Following up on that, I think as wonderful as the theoretical conversations about AI in the law are, they're pretty esoteric, especially to the law student and any real practicing attorney. So with the goal of trying to implement it into our potential coursework and all other aspects of being an attorney, what skills do you believe future lawyers need the most, whether it's technical literacy, ethical reasoning, or something else to thrive in a profession that's going to be dramatically tilted towards AI were we to continue this path?
Well, starting with technical literacy, I think that's very important. It's one of the reasons that we're bringing as many of the prominent AI legal tech companies into the law school to give students the opportunity to test these tools and understand what they're capable of. I always think about things like Harvey or Spellbook or Claude. If we didn't teach students how to use Westlaw or Lexis, I always say we'd be committing educational malpractice. And I believe the same now is true for these tools, that our students need to have facility with them, at least understand what they're capable of doing, and hopefully have some interactions with them before they graduate, so they know what to look for, what kind of tools will be most helpful to them in their particular practice areas when they graduate. And so technical literacy is important. And in addition to that, AI and ChatGPT and similar platforms really offer opportunities for creativity as you're practicing law and thinking about what to build to help your clients. It's not that hard. ChatGPT will tell you how to do it. And so I like the idea of students also going into law practice and saying to themselves, gee, we need a bot that can help us do something, and I know how to build that bot. Yesterday, Andrew Perlman, who's dean at Suffolk Law School, gave a great example of how his students deploy their sort of technological sophistication in the real world. One of his students graduated with and ended up practicing family law. And she ended up writing a bunch of prenuptial agreements and realized that, hey, I can actually reach more people with my legal expertise if I build a platform, a tool, to help other people build prenuptial agreements. You know, prenuptial agreements were always the province of the wealthy, right? But maybe you want one even if you're not wealthy, and you don't want to hire a lawyer to do it. So she built a tool called Hello Prenup. And I'm getting married in a year, so I might need to think about this. Don't tell my fiance, okay? And she ended up on Shark Tank, and she got 2 shark investors. I've never watched that show, I'm sad to say, but apparently she did attract 2 VC investors to invest in her tool. So it was because she was exposed to these kinds of things in law school at Suffolk, where they really have a very deep program in technology. She was able to think about how to build her own tool. And I know there are many students here at WashU who are thinking about this. I talk to Udit, for example, all the time about his ideas. We have a wonderful Scandalaris Center here for Entrepreneurship and Innovation that can help students think through these creative ideas. So I think, you know, in response to Bernard's question, what are the upsides? One of the upsides is the opportunity for creativity. So yes, I think technological sophistication is extremely important. And the other thing you asked me about, what is, Alex, the other area that do we need to pay attention to?
Well, I mentioned ethical reasoning, because
yes.
it's going to think for us.
Yes, ethical reasoning. Look, let's face facts. Artificial intelligence, large language models are trained on human-produced content. And what do we know about human-produced content? It has biases. We all live with biases. And so in thinking about things like sentencing, one of the ideas people have is that we can use AI to to recommend sentences for individuals who are convicted in the criminal justice system. But we also know, based upon previous sentencing data, is that something that's a good idea? Not necessarily, because the way that human beings have sentenced defendants in the past is subject to its own form of bias. And so we have to be aware that what's produced from these large language models as it's produced today is itself formulated on the basis of a foundation or on a foundation of data that itself could be the product of human biases. So yes, ethical reasoning couldn't be more important.
I think along with being able to ethically evaluate, the outcomes from these large language models is a bit of discernment, and it's something that we learned during the course of law school. But something we're seeing in like lower education in high school and middle school is students becoming over-reliant on AI and not learning how to develop the skills themselves in the first place. How do you balance that in an educational environment where you're teaching people how to use these tools, but you also want to make sure they're using the skills so they can evaluate these tools themselves?
You know, that's akin. Thanks, Eric. That's akin to the question of, can you be a good editor if you're not a good writer? And ultimately, you know, I don't think so. What AI produces itself needs editing in light of ethical concerns, you know, your specific understanding of the legal issues, et cetera, crafting sentences that are more suitable for particular context and all those sorts of things. That is dependent upon your ability to edit, and that depends upon your ability to write. And so we cannot, in the law school, abandon these basic skill development. I think that's very, very important. At the same time, we have to appreciate that students are going to use AI, so we have to figure out how to accommodate that use within the boundaries of ensuring that they are learning what they need to learn to be good writers and to understand the law. You know, the other thing, too, is, of course, AI hallucinates. And if you don't understand the basic legal context in which you're operating, you may not recognize that hallucination. It may say something that's completely wrong. And so we will continue to teach students these basic skills, these fundamental skills to being an excellent lawyer and to learning the law. And at the same time, we will help students think through how to deploy these tools in a way that will make them more efficient as lawyers.
Thank you. Dean, I feel like I have the pleasure of asking you probably the question that's on everyone's mind here, and it's, will AI replace people in their jobs? I think that's a serious concern. I think some of the capabilities of AI, particularly as it relates to reasoning and writing, are scary for some folks. And I think we'd love to know your perspective on how we kind of enter into this space that we're already in, of AI being here and people fearing about job displacement.
Bernard, it's the question of the hour, isn't it? As a 1L, it's a particular concern to you, I suspect, and Alex. Someone said to me recently that, and I think we reiterated on a panel this week, that AI will probably not replace lawyers, but lawyers who know AI will replace those lawyers who don't. And I think there's probably considerable truth in that because of the real potential for AI to increase our productivity, our creativity, the excellence of our work product. If you're a lawyer who shuns this technology going forward, you may be at a considerable disadvantage to those lawyers who use it. And clients expect lawyers to use this now. There is many, many stories of large corporations telling law firms, what are your plans for deploying AI so we can pay you less in terms of hourly, the accumulation of billable hours. And so I don't think it's going to replace lawyers. Now, I've talked to others who think it will. I don't believe that. I think human beings, when it comes to, for those of you who have ever had your own lawyer in whatever dispute or concern you've had, lawyers play a role in supporting other human beings in dispute resolution, in developing, developing business collaborations, et cetera, et cetera. And that human interaction, which is EQ, not just IQ, is extremely important for people. And as long as people remain in charge, and that, by the way, gets us back to AI governance. Let's make sure we remain in charge. Humans in the loop everywhere we look. Lawyers will be important to humankind, and just in light of what I said about lawyers who know AI will replace lawyers who don't, that gets us back to why we're focusing on legal technology and AI here at the law school, because I want all of our lawyers who graduate from the law school to have a facility with this, so that they don't have to worry about that, Bernard.
To that end, do you foresee the development of specialized tracks, clinics, certificates, et cetera, focused on AI and emergent technology law? We obviously want to get this into the hands of our students if we want them to learn from it. So what specific direction do we have for that beyond, as a first year, we use it constantly in legal research methods?
Well, thanks, Alex. And we've started on thinking about that through our AI collaborative, which, as you know, is headed by Ryan Dury, the professor, and Oliver Roberts. And so we want to build programming. Right now, what we're doing is building programming for a number of different constituencies, including judges, so that WashU Law becomes the premier deliverer, so to speak, of continuing legal education or judicial education to the judiciary to help them think through how to use these tools effectively and ethically. And I think WashU can really make a name for itself helping other constituencies outside the law school. And by the way, that's good for our students because then judges learn about WashU law and what we're doing, and that makes it more likely that our students will get clerkships with them. So I think that's important. But we are also thinking about various tracks and courses. We've developed a number of new courses. This semester we have AI in the law, and we also have an AI in the judiciary course that's being offered. And we're looking at we have some online master's programs, and we're looking at specializations in AI for those online master's programs. Having said that, any ideas that you have, I know Udit, for example, has an idea for, I'm sorry to keep calling on you, Udit, but you're right here in front of me, and I talk to you all the time about this stuff. About building an entrepreneurship lab for law students to build and think about innovating in this space. So we could certainly do that. I'm very keen on collaborations with the engineering school, with the business school, to work on developing some courses where these ideas can be fleshed out with fellow students who are in different disciplines. And so that can help us understand how to build businesses focused on this kind of technology. So yes, thinking about it, and I want to say to the group that's here, any ideas you have, as all of you, I hope know, students, email me all the time, and I hope I get back to you as quickly as I can to respond to your ideas. But some of the best ideas I get are from students. Are from students, and so look forward to hearing from you with your thoughts. Especially since many of you are out working in law firms in the summer, and you know what students need more than, frankly, I do in my work as an administrator.
One question I have is that, so we've talked about Professor Ryan Dury, and he's been very involved with the AI Collaborative. We also have a number of professors here who work on issues involving AI. Professor Kim with AI and employment discrimination, Professor Richards, Professor Frankenreiter uses a lot of LLMs in his research. In what ways are you looking to leverage this homegrown talent that we already have here at WashU?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned, because I'm looking over at Peter Hook, but that also in our research courses for the 1Ls, you should have learned a little bit about AI and how to use it in your research courses too. So we, I think, are advancing substantially there too. So Eric, you asked me just one word to refresh my memory because I was thinking about the library.
How are we looking to leverage our homegrown
yes.
talent?
We hired Professor Choi, who's coming in January, and as you mentioned, including James Hicks, Professor Hicks, who's an expert in copyright and AI. We really have a wonderful cluster of faculty members who understand this technology, understand the regulation issues, understand how to use it in their research. Professor Frankenreiter leverages AI to study public filings at the SEC, for example, and has done some really impressive work scanning thousands and thousands of documents using AI to understand how the SEC does its work. And so, and how when SEC regulations change, they affect what happens in individual companies. So, so we have a wonderful cluster, I guess you'd call it, of faculty that I think we want to share with the world, right? And we have developed some materials helping prospective students and other faculty members understand our evolving expertise in this area. And so I'm always singing from the rooftops what our faculty are doing. And having said that too, I'll say that we also think a lot, and Vice Dean Gardner and others, about how to leverage AI in our research. And there's all kinds of upside to that potentially.
Awesome. And One of the things I wanted to ask you, Dean, is we kind of talked about some of the exciting things that AI can do for research and obviously what we're doing here as students, but how do we kind of balance the excitement of AI with becoming over-reliant on it? And how do we kind of strike that balance between relying on it to help us be more productive and to best meet our needs, but not relying on it too much to where it's a detriment or it's kind of replacing or inhibiting us from doing the work that we're assigned to do?
You know, it's a fascinating question. It reminds me of, so let's think back historically a little bit and think about over-reliance. When I was in law school, it was the very beginning, I'm dating myself, but that's okay. It was the very beginning of the use of Westlaw and Lexis. And I was taught how to shepherdize cases in paper. Did you know that for the students in the room, shepardizing was done with a book? And you had to go through the citations of your case, and then you had to go to the pocket part. And Westlaw makes that, that particular practice obsolete. And I don't know, I'm again looking at Peter, I don't know if you all teach with the paper. No. And so I think eventually we're probably going to start thinking about AI in those terms as well, where it is, ubiquitous. Everyone uses it all the time, and we'll start thinking about it as a supercharger of our intellect rather than something that we're dependent upon, because it is a reality, right? It is going to be a real part of what we do every day. And so I'm hopeful that we can develop our own capabilities, in response to Eric's question, we can develop these fundamental capabilities and skills while at the same time understanding that this is the way it's going to be, right? And we want to make sure we leverage it to the extent possible to have productive lives and and careers.
Thank you very much for that answer. So overall, I'm thinking about the landscape. We're a law school in of itself, but we're also in a competing sea with other law schools, if you will, or you could view it as a collaborative network, however people want to see it. Regardless, we are trying to take up the mantle of leading law schools into AI legal education. I obviously read that you published with Professor Roberts that law schools that are not teaching AI courses are failing their students. So when we think about that, what obligation do law schools have to their students and the legal profession as a whole as it relates to AI and the law? And I think after that, we might want to open up to audience questions.
Well, most fundamentally, law schools need to help students understand the ethics associated with the use of AI. But I think at WashU, we're trying to obviously, think well beyond that. I think that's super important. But to me, it's preparing the students to enter this new reality, so to speak, this new landscape that is going to be where legal practice is shaped by AI. And so I agree with the article that I wrote. I do think that law schools owe their students the duty to help them understand what life is going to be like in 5 years, and who knows what it's going to be like in 5 years. This stuff is changing, exponentially on a daily basis, it seems. And so I think we're doing the right thing at WashU, and I do think, every once in a while someone will say to me, well, AI is just like the internet, and the internet didn't change how we do business, and I disagree. The internet is a platform for providing information at our fingertips at any minute of the day. AI generates stuff, right? It generates text. And much of what we do as lawyers is text. And so we would be remiss not to really leap into this, I think, with our eyes wide open, but appreciating what it's going to do. You all are going to be living in a far different world than I lived in with my paper shepherds. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Dean Lindquist and panel. Thanks for the name drops and the great questions. I kind of had a more fun question, or maybe not. In Silicon Valley, people refer to the probability that AI will lead to human extinction as P-doom, and most leading AI researchers put that between 10 and 50%. The Federal Reserve of St. Louis just put out an economic report saying that AI will either lead to GDP growth of 4% over baseline or human extinction, at which point GDP would go to zero. If AI does escape human control and we do enter the singularity extinction scenario, will there still be a legal system and law schools?
That's very funny you did. Obviously not. So this gets back to the governance question. And I think one of the original estimates was 10 to 50%, 15% likelihood of extinction. That's high enough for me to be worried about. And I read about this issue all the time. I'm a big maybe this is why I like AI so much, but I'm a big science fiction person. It has always amazed me how prescient science fiction writers are. And I always cite as the example the flip phone that's used on Star Trek in the 1960s. The 1960s, Star Trek was showing a flip phone. That's unbelievable. I'm just waiting for the transporter mechanism, right, where we get beamed up. I'd love that because I'm sick of being on airplanes. But I do worry about this a lot. Everybody should. It's part of our overarching concern, and science fiction can help us understand that. I really believe that. The human, sort of human imagination, how it's thought through these issues is remarkably accurate in some circumstances. Also, I read a lot about this, and there is a couple of books I want to recommend. One has a really terrible title, but it's worth a read just to get the worst case scenario, and that's something like, If Someone Builds It, We All Die. Okay, and it hypothesizes that one of the ethical concerns with AI is its energy usage. Right? AI is an energy hog. And this particular book, written by a couple scientists, suggests that AI the superintelligence will want to continue to sort of grow as a superintelligence. And the only way for it to do that is with more energy. And so that one of the scenarios is that AI eventually builds enough robots to build enough solar panels to cover the world with solar panels to power its brain. And once you cover the world with solar panels, we're just ants, right? We won't have any way to produce food or anything else. So that's a worst case scenario. Another great book that I read right at the beginning of my journey with AI is a book called Life 3.0. And in Life 3.0, a guy named Max Tigert, who has an actual institute where he's focused on these issues of extinction and detriment to humankind. He's very worried about it. But the first chapter is a chapter about how superintelligence can seep out of even a system that is fenced in, and then what it will do once it does. And I highly recommend, if you don't read the whole book, read the first chapter. The superintelligence is called Prometheus, and there's a reason for that. Remember, he stole fire from the gods. It ended up pinned to a wall with an eagle eating his liver every day. That's your Greek myth of the day. And so this AI being is called Prometheus in this chapter, and it's really worth a read. In fact, if it's not violating copyright, I might post that chapter somewhere available to you because it is really interesting. The answer to your question, though, Udit, is governance and regulation. And so far, not so good on that.
Anyone else have any questions?
So I heard you talking about kind of the ethical obligations that schools have to their students and that lawyers have to their clients. If AI eventually is, another fun hypothetical, maybe integrated biologically or has more kind of things that a person has to do, maybe have a chip ingrained, something like that. I know there's technology working. Do you think that obligation remains when there is kind of a higher threshold of using the technology? Like, how do we balance the use of the technology with the obligations of efficiency that lawyers have to their clients?
Well, that is a fundamentally important philosophical question. That would be a great science fiction novel to talk about what would happen if human beings that choose not to integrate the chip, what happens to them, right? And that is a serious worry because we already have Google Glasses. I've never used those, but right, they have the internet running through them all the time. And so they're in effect a form of chip. Now, they have not really caught on, but I do think that eventually people are going to opt for a chip. I really do. And I think we're approaching that day. And so, again, it gets us back to governance. Do we want to recognize the rights of human beings who choose not to install a chip? And I, of course, would be a proponent of that. But, you know, at the same time, it's worrisome. It's worrisome. And there are a number of jobs. I worry a lot about the jobs that will, sort of a related concern, is jobs that will be displaced by AI. Autonomous vehicles are already all over the streets of, you know, a number of cities. And taxi drivers, Uber drivers, truck drivers, you know, we need to find meaningful professions for people who lose. And this is, you know, disruptive innovation has done this throughout history. But, you know, we could see vast sort of sections of the economy be decimated by machines. I think we have to be concerned about that. Yes.
We got a question here.
Hi, Dean. You'd said earlier that you think one of the things that makes lawyers important is the human interaction aspect of things. I think if we see, especially younger teens, younger kids, are starting to rely on AI, whether as a friend or a therapist. So in that regard, if that reliance does sort of take away that human interaction, are lawyers still important? Or is there a world where we could still say that our job is still safe in that regard? And also, is there an obligation if they rely on AI to provide them legal advice that ends up, you know, they end up doing something illegal as regard? Is there an obligation to sort of, whether it's circumvent that or to provide some sort of aid in a situation like that?
You know, I worry a lot about the friendship with a chatbot. Thank you, Favor, for the question. A friendship with a chatbot. There's movies made about this. Isn't there a movie called Her, where a guy fell in love with a machine? I think there were bad consequences from that, but I can't recall exactly. You know, lawyers, human beings, at least historically, have valued the interaction with other human beings. I do worry that we're becoming more and more isolated. I think that's leading to polarized politics. Because we, you know, as Robert Putnam wrote in a famous book, we're bowling alone. Bowling leagues have gone out of style. Religion is going out of style. Churches are not as, you know, well attended as they were. Other kind of civic organizations are losing membership. And so this isolation is not good for humans. I think unless AI can produce a very human-like robot, I think we still matter. And even then, I think we do, because I don't think we can count on artificial intelligence, anything that's driven by artificial intelligence, at least now, to have the same ethical guardrails that humans do and can have. And that is what lawyers bring to the table, that kind of advice on interacting with other humans that a robot may not have. I will say, though, that in my speech at the installation, I talked about a company called Eliza Wakes Up, and it's a $420,000 robot that has an animatronic face, a silicone animatronic face. It can run an 8-minute mile and can cut a cigar. And they're taking orders now, as I said in my speech. And so it may not be in the too distant future that we start seeing these folks walking around, I don't know if you want to call them that, robots walking among us. Thanks, though. I don't know if I got your question perfectly or answered, Favor, because it's such an important question.
Before we get to this next question, I do want to point out a couple of things. I know some of the students will have to head to a 1 o'clock class here, so I wanted to point this out. We have the attendance QR code over here, so make sure you scan that on your way out. And don't walk in front of the camera. So here's the next question.
Hi, I'm a WashU alum. I've been in good standing with Missouri Bar for 52 years. And throughout my practice, I'd always been insistent on being ahead of the technological curve. But right now, I am not, and I don't like it one bit. What I would implore the school to do is to reach out also to its alumna to bring them to date.
Yes, and thank you so much. We did last year, we offered 2 seminars here in St. Louis, which we opened up to alumni, and I'm sorry if you did not get notice of that. It was about a 4-hour seminar looking at both the technology on the one side and regulation and governance on the other. They're 2 different things, but looking at both. And we will continue to do that, and also offering CLE courses for our alums. So, yeah.
4 months a year. Thank you, the practice of law. I hope for those of us who can't be here physically, could you stream them?
Yes,
Please.
and we have done that with CLEs, but we'll continue to do it and make sure I have your email address.
And finally, I hope that you will have the speakers provide copies of their presentations by slide so that we can take those.
Definitely, we'll do that as well. And so, thank you, and let's make sure we correspond. Well, I guess everybody's leaving. I just want to thank this. I'm sure you all have something to say in closing, but I want to thank these incredible students for the opportunity to talk today about AI, and thank everybody in the audience for being here and for participating in our legal tech events. They've been really fascinating so far, and I hope you enjoyed them. But thank you, Bernard,
you.
Alex, and Eric,
Thank you.
wherever Eric is.
Just wanted to echo your words. I think the leadership that you're leading here in regards to AI, I think we're all beneficiaries of it. And so we look forward to the continued partnership and work to integrate this wonderful technology. So thank you.
And I would just want to add that obviously Bernard and I and Eric and anyone in technology and privacy law side might be a bit biased compared to the average student, but I do think this is certainly the right course to move forward, and I'm very excited to see what happens.